let us agree that, at least in a measure, we do understand this, and that on the whole our thoughts and deeds are conforming to this pattern, this realization of oneself. We have accepted the Master's teaching in the 25th Matthew. We have accepted that as ye sow, so shall ye reap. We have accepted that which has been a known truth. Well, it exists in written form as far back as 1500 BC. Do unto others as you would have others do unto you. And remember, that was written not for any school book copy or precept. That was written as cosmic law, and probably originally said, not do unto others as you would have others do unto you, but it will be done unto you as you do unto others, because there is but the one. Having accepted and seen and understood this, let us see this now in connection with the work in which we are engaged, that is, spiritual healing, spiritual demonstration, spiritual living. This will make it clear to you why we cannot demonstrate person, place, or thing. That is why we cannot demonstrate an automobile or more money or a good position or a practice or a student body. This will make it clear to you why we can only demonstrate God, because the demonstration is the bringing forth in practical experience of the one self. Now, if instead of this appearance you, if I can retire into meditation, into quiet, and perceive God as your being, I will have demonstrated God as your experience. And since God is the embodiment of all good, the source of all good, the creative principle of all good, in demonstrating God, I will have demonstrated your good. Then outwardly it will appear as that automobile you need, or the position, or the health. But do you see why the demonstration of the health or wealth must fail when it is attempted as if it was something separate and apart from God's self? Now, if I do demonstrate by mental hocus pocus or any other abracadabra an automobile for you, or wealth, or health, I have left you with nothing more than if we had gone out here to an empty coconut tree and strung coconuts on it and say, I have made your demonstration of supply. No, we haven't. That tree would never acknowledge that the coconuts hanging on it are its supply. It would acknowledge its supply as the coconuts which come flowing up from within itself and then hang themselves out on a branch. It could look out on those and say, my demonstration is made. So with us, we can hang wealth or health onto a person, sometimes through mental treatment, sometimes through physical help, but all we have done is hang coconuts onto the outside of a tree and believe that we were demonstrating the fulfillment of a coconut tree, and we weren't. Now then, when we turn to you your patients, your students, ultimately this world, and realize, I must demonstrate your God self. I must make the demonstration of God for you. I must demonstrate the presence and activity of the Christ of you. Now we have turned to the 12th chapter of Luke, the 22nd to 23rd verses, and we have begun to seek ye the kingdom of God and his rightness. Now when we sit back in meditation and forget about the automobile you need, or the money, or the health, we turn completely away from you. We turn within ourselves and wait and wait and wait. We wait for 3 or 4 or 5 minutes. If at the end of that time we have not felt a response within ourselves, we get up and go about some other duties. And then an hour or 2 or 3 later, we return again to that inner meditation, and there just wait silently. It doesn't make any difference whether thoughts are going around in your mind. Not interested in that. We're just waiting silently until the voice of God utters itself within us. We're just waiting until we have an activity of the Christ stirring within us. What's going on in our mind won't stop that activity. We are sitting here waiting. And if it doesn't come in 3 or 4 or 5 minutes, we again get up and go about our business. And 2 or 3 hours later, we do it again. If it is necessary, we keep this up for 1 or 2 or 3 years. If so be that the Christ is so absent from us that it takes us that long to realize it. But you may be assured of this, that if you persist, the day will come when an inner response will come that will give you the assurance of a He that is within you, that which the Master called the Father within, that which Paul called the Christ. You will get that feeling, that assurance, and when you do, you will have demonstrated your Christ self. Now, when you have demonstrated your Christ self, your God self, you have at that instant demonstrated the God self of your patient, because there never was more than one self. That's why it wasn't necessary to transfer thoughts from one to another or get a treatment over to somebody. The mere fact that they contacted you made you of one household, God. And so it is that every activity of truth felt within you at that instant became a law unto your patient or student, and you did not have to think of your patient or student or of their name or where they were or what was wrong with them, because we're not demonstrating something for them, nor are we demonstrating the getting rid of something for them. Please remember that part, won't you? We are never attempting the demonstration of getting rid of. We are never attempting the demonstration of overcoming, any more than we are attempting the demonstration of getting. We are attempting only the demonstration of God's presence, the demonstration of the activity of the Christ within us. Then, because you brought yourself to this room, you partake of every activity of Christ within me. If I send for you, or if you were advertised for, or if you came for some ulterior motive, you shut yourself out because you had never included yourself in. When you come of your own free will, when you come through some divine urge or leading within, the work is already done before you get here, for the simple reason that the same divine impulse that sent you here is meeting you here. Do you see that? That is why when a person of their own volition asks for help, they inevitably get it. That is why when we try to go around being do-gooders, try to inflict God on people, we not only do them a disservice, but we end up by getting in trouble ourselves. Just the same as somebody would get in a lot of trouble who would come in here trying to sell me on the idea of giving up God. Now, I'm telling you, they'd find a very unpleasant experience. But I also remember a time when somebody tried to sell me on the idea of God, and they got a very unpleasant response, because I wasn't ready for it. Why should anyone enter my household and try to sell me anything? I have the same divine intelligence that anyone else has, and if I'm not ready for it to be made manifest, nobody on this earth can give it to me or sell it to me. Now, I'm saying that for this reason. As you go out into the world, you will find those who misunderstand the nature of the work of the infinite way. Only this trip, I was accused of being so exclusive, I bar everybody out. That isn't true, and you know it. I don't bar anybody out, I just don't invite them in. That's right, I'm not barring anyone. My doors have never been closed to anyone that sought me in all the years that I'm in this work. But I've had a lot of people dragged to my door that I just wouldn't bother with after they got there. When the change came to me in my work from practitioner to teacher, it didn't come because I sought it. I was a practitioner 16 years before I did healing work. But when it came by an inside unfoldment, revelation, and it came in plain English. And the last words that were uttered were these: never seek a student. Always care for those who are sent to you by spiritual impulse, and then give them what is given you to give them. Those were my orders. Never seek a student. Only yesterday I had to write a letter saying, no, I'm sorry, I cannot give my permission for you to put a notice in the newspaper about Infinite Way meetings. Oh, a newspaper notice is so harmless. Yes, it is harmless. It is harmless. It serves as an advertisement. What are you advertising? That God will be given to you, or some form of good? Do you want to put an ad in the paper, God? Go ahead. Then at least nobody will come in under false pretenses. Now, it is true that wherever I speak, that sometimes a notice is put in the paper just to the effect that Joel S. Goldsmith, The Infinite Way, will talk. That is a little different, because that is merely a notice to those who already know Joel S. Goldsmith and The Infinite Way, and it's letting them know that he's in town, whereas otherwise they may not have any knowledge of it. It's not an ad, because there isn't a soul in the world who would answer that ad, except those who know. That's quite a different thing. But anything that is designed to bring people to this, or to promise them that their problems will be met, is just misleading them, because there is only one thing we can promise anybody, and that is God. That we can do. We can bring God to their conscious realization. And if that is their interest, they are of the household of God. The moment they are seeking things, it's different. Now, that does not mean that we haven't the right to suggest to those of our friends or relatives who we find to be in difficulty that there is a way out for them. That is perfectly a legitimate activity. But in that case, we have the right to hand them a book or a pamphlet or a tape and then leave it with them. And if they go any further, that's their lookout. If they don't, it is also their lookout. Then there is no advertising, no coercion. There is giving to one's neighbor a cup of cold water in Christ's name. Certainly be as generous as you like in giving pamphlets or giving books or sharing tapes, but go no further than that. After that, it is up to the individual to do what they want to do, to make the overtures, to ask the questions. And you can see the reason. We are demonstrating cosmic consciousness and cosmic law. And that means the only demonstration we have to make is the demonstration of the God selfhood. And I can assure you that if you were to say to many people, this isn't the way of getting healthy, wealthy, or wise, it's just the way of finding God, that you would find many eager to have it on the 29th and a half of February, or the 32nd of May, or the fourth Thursday in each week. No, let us understand the nature of this work. This work is spreading more rapidly than we have been able to take care of it. And not nearly as rapidly as it would if any of the human means were used to let it spread or be known. And it will spread under divine impulsion. But let us realize now that the function is first with us as individuals. We cannot save the world if we ourselves are not saved. Physician, heal thyself is the truth. Now then, if I can make my conscious contact with God, I can in some measure be a blessing to you. If you can make your conscious union with God, you in turn can be a blessing in some degree to others. And in that degree we can bless the world. But not if we stay in the realm of the intellectual knowledge of this truth without the spiritual apprehension of it. And this comes when we understand what the principle is that we're doing. Now let me pick up here. There is but one selfhood. That selfhood is where I am, since I and the Father are one. All that God is, I am. All that the Father hath is mine. Now, with that understanding, I can dispense with all further thinking. And I can sit patiently and wait. Now this is where our real work is done, in this waiting. If sitting here I attain the conscious realization of the presence of God, if I attain a feeling of the activity of the Christ within me, everyone in this room must feel that impulse. Everyone who is at all inclined to be receptive to the voice or Spirit of God, and in that degree then this realized activity of Christ within me becomes the law of harmony unto you, but not only unto you. the realized Christ, the risen Christ, the activity of the Christ within me realized, becomes an influence in this entire world. I have no way of knowing at this moment where some receptive person in the world, may be in a hospital, it may be in a prison dungeon, it may be in a battlefront, it may be in high political office or low, it may be anywhere in the world where an individual is sitting pondering or saying, "Oh God, can you help me? Oh, is there a God to help me?" Wherever an individual is reaching out for something beyond the human, the realized Christ of this moment reaches them. The more of the realized Christ there is in the world, the more the need of the world is being met. You have no more idea what takes place through the realization of the Christ in you than I have. And I have but very little, although I have seen a great deal. For instance, if I were to look around this room and think of the lives that have been touched by the infinite way in places where I was not personally known, where nothing of a human nature came into the scene, where my sitting at home, abiding in this truth, realizing my conscious union with God, until the very flood of it took place within me, the feeling of it, the realization of it, and that's all I've ever done in my life in this work. That's the only advertising I've ever done, and that's the only effort I've ever made toward helping people, is that inner realization of Christhood. And then all of a sudden it brought this lady from Florida and somebody from California and somebody from Hawaii. And it seems impossible, as you look at this mail all around the world, to believe that just sitting in a room, the influence could have been felt at such far distant places. And that is not the extent of what I'm talking about. I still do not know how many people there are in the world who have had healings, mental, physical, moral, financial, just by themselves sitting at home wondering if there was a God to help them, and by the very act of reaching out to the invisible and the unseen and the unknown, that they touched this very Christ that was released here or in you when you were at your work. Now this I have been taught within, that the day is coming when there will be a band of Christhood around the world, a circle of Christhood. Not persons, not people, I'm not speaking of that. I'm speaking of a band of spiritual consciousness around the world. And you know how it will get there? By these realizations of Christ. The Christ, as Browning tells us, is within ourselves, bottled up there, corked up. We must open out a way for that imprisoned splendor to escape. But if we open out a way for the Christ to flow from us, can it localize itself here and benefit only us, or must it rush out to wherever consciousness is open to the Christ? Do you see that? Now, every time we sit in a meditation, whether we are alone or whether there are two or more gathered in this name, and we have no selfish purpose, we have only the desire for this communion with God, and that realization comes to us, we have allowed the imprisoned splendor to escape, and now it's out in the world, and it is doing its work. It is literally a presence that goes before this world to make the crooked places straight. It is the healing Christ. It is the Savior of mankind. Christ is the Savior of mankind. but Christ is locked up in our bosoms until such time as we make a way for that imprisoned splendor to escape. We do that through meditation, through realization. Then, when the feeling, that impulse comes, now it is out in the world about the Father's business. And somewhere in this world there are those reaching out for Christ's help and receiving it. Now do you see why we do not demonstrate persons, places, things, or conditions? We demonstrate the presence and activity of the Christ, and let the Christ do all the performing, adding to, destroying in the outer world. Because the Christ destroys everything unlike its own nature and character. And what can that possibly be except the belief of a selfhood apart from God? Do you see that? Well, let us meditate for a little while. Now you will see why these groups will be small and why they will consist only of those who have been serious students, because the step that we are about to take is this. It must be true that if the activity of the Christ could come alive in me sufficiently to have enabled me to work these 25 years in this work with some little measure of success, then it must be possible for the activity of the Christ to come alive in everybody on the face of the globe who is spiritually prepared for the experience. Now, I do not for a minute believe that it is an experience that it is possible to everyone on the globe at the present moment, any more than I believe that everybody can go out and get a degree in engineering or architecture or anything else without the necessary preliminary studies. And I do not believe that everybody on earth is of the fertile soil. Otherwise the Master would not have referred to the rocky and the barren, and the fact that the poor we shall always have with us, the poor in spirit, the poor in spiritual development. Now that doesn't mean that they will not eventually evolve. They will, because in the end every knee must bend, every knee must bow. Everyone ultimately will come into the spiritual heritage. But we are coming into it individually. Those of you who have given 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 hours a day to study, meditation, practice, must certainly be developing a higher spiritual awareness than those who are devoting 30 minutes a day or 20 minutes a day. And of course you can tell in your own experience whether or not that is true. You can tell in the experience of your friends. The mere fact that one cannot give hours a day to this shows that they haven't the spiritual preparation for it. They get fed up after 20, 30, 50, 60 minutes, and they're all choked up and filled up with it. Now, we've probably all been through that same boat. Most of us have. I have. Now, the day comes when our appetite develops to such an extent that we just cannot satisfy it. No matter how many days or weeks we stay at it, or how many hours a day. All right then, let us assume that those who have been, by their studies and meditations, spiritually prepared, the time must be now for the awakening of the Christ, the rising of the Christ in them. And you can know when it happens by its fruitage. There must be healings There must be comfortings. There must be risings up out of sin, lack, poverty. There must be good coming into the experience of those who seek you. Not necessarily those you would like to save. Unfortunately, it is often members of our own family who cannot be saved. Unfortunately, it is those of our own household who often are our enemies, not our disciples. It isn't given to us to decide who is to be saved. What is that to thee if I say, follow me, and to the other fella, tarry a while until I come? What is that to do with you, whether this is the day of your unfoldment or somebody else's day of unfoldment, or whether it isn't their day of unfoldment? That is something between themselves and their God. But there must be in our infinite way circle those who are ready now to say, yes, you're right. We've certainly talked enough and heard enough about this Christ, and we surely have faith that it's true when the Christ is here, all things are added. But now how about not talking quite so much about it and demonstrating a little bit more of it? Why be satisfied with whatever tiny measure of it we have yet experienced? Because there are serious days ahead of us. The infinite way work could expand tremendously if it were permitted to. But if it did at this particular time, it would find us unready, because we haven't enough students who are ready to leave their mothers and brothers and fathers and sisters and get out into this world and do some healing work and some practice work. We haven't enough yet that are ready to tear away from their kitchen stoves and household duties to really and truly get out and give themselves to this work. And before this work can go much further, there must be healers, and there must be those who know the letter of truth sufficiently to impart it. Now, the letter is simple enough. It really means studying the writings and the recordings diligently until those principles are clearly established in thought. That must come, and this awakened Christ must come. Then, with a few dozen or so, we can sit back and welcome the greater unfoldment that wants to come. Until then, it is with fear that I watch it. The first London letter, May, went to 300 people, and the second one, June, is going to 450, and those were all people who requested it. Do you see what I mean by a growth? Now just think, if I were personally there to enhance it, what would be happening? And so it is every place. If I had asked large groups in Seattle and Chicago, we would have filled auditoriums. So many were waiting. These people have seen that. The crowds are waiting, if only we'll open the doors to them. But how can we? How can we, when I spoke on television in Chicago and the response was so tremendous that I had to refuse to go back? Because the first question is, well, you keep talking about healing. Can you really heal us? And then I have to go back into the shell, because we haven't sufficient workers to say, yes, of course we can. Do you see that? That is why it has been, there's been fear in me of some sort as I watch this unfoldment, because I don't want to see anything break. I don't want to see anything take place in the world unless our students are ready when it comes to take hold of it and say, yes, let them come. There is no death, there is no disease, and I know that well enough to handle the cases, the people, the situations that might come. But more than all this, I have felt this risen Christ, and I know that it can handle everything that comes my way. And so our work now in these groups will be the development and the unfoldment and the revelation of the Christ as an experience, not as a teaching. The first chapter of the new book, Living the Infinite Way, tells you that the infinite way is not a teaching, it is an experience. But that's only true in the case of those of us who have experienced it. To the others, it's still a teaching. But we must make it literally true that it isn't a teaching, it is an experience. Now, the very moment that you are able to meditate long enough to come into this experience of actually feeling and witnessing the Christ in action, that is the moment then that you can say, "Come unto me, all ye who labor and are heavy laden, and I can give you rest." You will find in the book Metaphysical Notes the theme of what we are trying to bring forth now. Remember when I said that in these periods, 2 or 3 periods of meditation each day, in which we will not take our problems or our family or our friends or the nation or world peace or anything else, we will merely go for a realization of God, for that pure realization of God with no purpose. Not that we want God to do anything for us or for anybody else, not that we're seeking anything, merely for pure realization. Now, behind that is this: my conscious realization of my oneness with God constitutes my oneness with all spiritual being and idea. In other words, when I succeed in making that contact with God, remember that I have made my contact with you and 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 you all over the globe, because in your spiritual identity you are one with that which I now have realized. In the same way, the moment I realize, make contact with that infinite invisible, I have made contact with my supply, with my home, with my companionship, with every rightful spiritual activity of existence, because all of these are embodied in the infinity of that Godhead. Therefore, I do not get at one with what I shall eat to drink today and wherewithal I shall be clothed tomorrow. I do not get at one with health in this meditation and at one with home in the next meditation. I do not get at one with physical, mental, moral, financial healing in the next one. But in the contact with the infinite invisible, I have made my contact with the infinity of being, with the allness of being, and that, of course, appears to our sense as the added things, that is, those things humanly necessary to our experience. Now, it came to me during the night that this very work does go back to that book, Metaphysical Notes, in which the realization was brought forth that there is nothing to demonstrate except that contact with God. Because the moment we have consciously attuned ourselves to it, we are at one with God, which means that we are at one with all that God is God to. That is, with all that the creative principle has made in its own image and likeness. Now, from there, it is but one step to this that comprises the unfoldment that is imparting itself to us now, but which is the one point which we do not readily grasp. Now, it is not an easy one until it comes by inner light. I can tell you that I have had my own struggles with it, and it was only when the inner light itself came that in about 3 or 4 words the demonstration was made. Now, heretofore, we have thought of our spiritual activity, whether it was our studies or our meditations, as the turning of discord into harmony, sickness into health, lack into abundance, loneliness into companionship, homelessness into a home. But from this point on, and this point is not to be given to your patients or your students at this time. This is to be demonstrated first. From this time on, when the temptation comes up about health, lack, this and that, you immediately remember health or sickness, lack or abundance, homelessness or home, loneliness or companionship. What of it? Neither of these pairs of opposites enter into our demonstration. Here is the secret of spiritual living. Once you can rise above the desire for physical harmony, then you are entering the spiritual kingdom of God. As long as our thought, which it has been in metaphysics, is on exchanging our discords for harmonies, we still have only traveled part of the journey. Now, the journey is really not one of going from physical discord to physical harmony, because that would merely mean a matter of time. Because if we are completely healthy today, well, tomorrow we're a day older. 10 years from now we're 10 years older, and inevitably that physical change of age, discord, disability, and death overtakes us. It is a legitimate thing for our patients and young students to be interested in overcoming the discords of sense and of achieving harmony in their so-called human experience. And it is a wonderful step forward when they turn from material means to spiritual means to achieving it. But it is not the end of the road. It is only part way along the road, because all we have done is to rise above our temporary discords into temporary harmonies. But we have not yet achieved the realization of the spiritual kingdom. It doth not yet appear what the glories of God are. No, as long as we are exchanging physical discord for physical harmony, you still have no idea what the kingdom of God is like, or what the spiritual riches are like, or even spiritual health. You have no idea of it. Just the fact that the heart beats regularly, or that the organs function what the world calls normally, gives no impression of what spiritual harmony is like. None at all. It is only when we rise above physical harmony that we begin to enter the spiritual realm. And so it is that we, and this is true now of the small groups to whom I'm telling this, it is necessary that we, when we are presented with a discord, whether in and of ourselves or those who come to us, that we say to ourselves, physical health or physical sickness, physical wealth or physical poverty. Not either of these is the end and object of my spiritual search for God. And of course, at first, there will be many arguments. But ultimately you will see that rising above the physical discords into physical harmonies is really has no bearing on our spiritual life. Our spiritual life begins only where we rise above physical harmony into spiritual realities. Now that is why I said that for us problems are necessary. It is vital that we have problems, because the temptation to rest in physical health and physical supply would rob us. It is just like meditations in which we attain a sense of peace or harmony or the realization of the presence of the Christ. These are most wonderful experiences when they come. But after we have experienced those, we have to rise to the next higher level, in which they are of no significance and of no importance whatsoever, since, having realized omnipresence of the Christ, what difference does it make whether we have an emotional feeling about it or not? Whether we feel then emotionally satisfied or emotionally starved will make no difference, since we will have realized that the activity of the Spirit is an eternal thing, whether or not there is any sense of feeling or emotion realized. Now, this is the point that will be, above all, the most difficult. The realization of physical health or physical sickness, what matter? Because in that realization will come the spiritual health. You will find that this is the essence of the chapter, The New Horizon, in the Infinite Way. And it will also explain why that chapter was never written. It was not even written as the other writings are written. It came through in an entirely different way. It came through in a dream. Word for word, as it appears in that chapter, it came through in a dream, written in gold, Old English lettering on a red silk banner that was suspended from my ceiling to my bed. And I awakened out of the sleep to find that banner still there. And I took the pencil and paper from my night table and copied down that message word for word, and then afterwards saw this banner fold itself up and disappear, and it has never reappeared. That is the chapter, The New Horizon. That's the way it came. And you will find that it reveals that all of human experience, that means the good human experience as well as the bad human experience, is an illusion. It's a dream. But it doesn't mean that this world is a dream. It means that this world as we see it is the dream. And from the moment that our interest in physical harmony disappears, we then begin to behold this universe as it is. When we awaken, we shall see him as he is, and we will be pleased with this likeness. We will be pleased with what we behold. Only, though, when we awaken. Now, the awakening comes when you can realize that health is only the opposite end of the stick of ill health, that wealth is only the opposite end of the stick of poverty. But somewhere in the spiritual realm, there must be a consciousness of no health and no lack of health. Just as eventually you come to see in relationship to God that God is no power. At first, God is a great power which overcomes lesser powers. God is the great spirit that overcomes error, overcomes sin, disease, death, lack, and limitation. Then comes the second unfoldment in the realization of God, in which God is the only power, and it does not overcome any other powers, since there are no other powers to be overcome. That is the realization in which there is no truth over error, no God over the devil, no spirit over matter, no reality over unreality, since the reality being the infinite all, these other things exist only as illusory beliefs and not as entities or identities or powers. That is when you come into the realization of God as infinite, all, the one being, the one power, the one law. But then you go on to the still higher realization of God, in which you learn that God is no power. Why is God no power? A power must always be a power unto something. A power must always exert itself in, through, over. But God is no such thing. God is a state of divine being. God is the state, the infinity of divine being. God is not a power because there is nothing for God to be a power to. God does not even create. God is an infinity of being appearing as. If God created, there would have to be a time of creation, probably even a place of creation, and then you'd have God confined to time and space. God is not confined to time and space, and therefore God is not confined to energy or power. God is. God is being. God is, and that's all that God is. God is not life, truth, love. God is not health, wealth, harmony, wholeness. God is not all of the things that God is supposed to be. God is. And that's what God is. God is. Anything else sets up a sense of separation, or it sets up time and space. Now, to understand God as no power, but just as being, is normally and naturally to see that there could be no such thing as health or unhealth, because then God would be being something. And God isn't something. God can't be confined to something. God is no thing. And that is literally true. God is no thing. God is nothing. God is no thing. God is being. And God is being what? God is being God. That's all God is ever being, is God. And in God is only the being which we would call infinity or immortality. And so there are no opposites. There is no such thing then as life and death. There is no such thing as health and sickness. There is no such thing as abundance and lack. There is only the infinity of God being God. Now, as the temptations come to us, and they do, and they continue to, not only in our own experience in some minor degree, rarely in any major degree, but in the experience of our patients and students in tremendous degree. There is where our major temptations come in that we are made to believe that there are conditions natural to others or present in others, not present in ourselves. And there is our temptation to wander away from the one self, which is all there is. The one self. Now, it's like looking right down a beam of light. To be able to say health, sickness, wealth, lack, loneliness, companionship, home, no home. You're looking straight down the beam of light and witnessing heaven, harmony, wholeness, completeness. The only way that I can describe it is to remind you that you can't feel the blood coursing through your body. You don't even at this moment know that there is any blood coursing through your body. You're not aware of any blood. It is functioning, it is taking its place, and you have no awareness of it, and so you can't say that it's healthy or unhealthy. You can't say that it's normal or abnormal. To you, the coursing of the blood in your body is non-existent. You have no knowledge of it. So it is with health. In the spiritual sense of health, you have no sense of health at all. You haven't even a sense of body. The body just functions, and you have no knowledge of it whatsoever. And that is why you will hear people in the 60s or 70s, when someone speaks of age, you'll notice the smile on their face, because they can't say it, but they don't know what you're talking about, age, because they don't feel any. There is no feeling of age. There isn't any more feeling of age than there was at 30 or 29 or 32. And that is because there is neither age nor youth. There is only being. I am being, and I have no more awareness of being 40 or 50 or 60 than I have when I was 10 or 20 or 30. I have no awareness of being some age. I merely have an awareness of being. And so it is with you. So it is with everybody. Even the oldest of people will tell you that sometimes they're aware of a physical discord, but they're not aware of being old. They're not aware of any age. It couldn't be, because the being which I am is an ageless being. No. The reason that the body separates itself from that sense and begins to show signs of age is because of the accepted belief that I and my body are two separate things, whereas I and my body are one. The Father and I are one. The principle of being and I are one, and that principle of being is embodied in the body that is the temple of the living God, which is as ageless as I am. Now, as we, more particularly we in the Message of the Infinite Way, come to this realization that the Word becomes flesh, that this God appears as, not in or through, but as, then we learn that this body is as incorruptible as the spirit of which it is formed. Then it is that the body does not age or have aging processes any more than we have. And we never have. No one ever is aware of being any older than they were 10 years ago. And if they feel any discord in the body, it is only because the me and my body have become two separate things, which is normal and natural according to human belief. Because we have this age-old medical belief that the body is responding to certain laws of matter which you aren't. You yourself may be immortal, but your body is subject to certain laws of matter. That is not true. Your body is subject to certain laws of material belief until, by an activity of your consciousness, you bring your body up to heaven's gates, and by another activity of consciousness carry him right through the gates into heaven. And then you'll never more be separated from your body, which means from your youth or strength or vitality. Now, this will not come while we are seeking health or supply or anything on the human plane. This will only come when we have given up the search for things and conditions and resolved our life's work into the realization of the activity of Christ within. When we no longer search for harmony, for peace, for safety, for security, for joy, or for anything that the world knows, my peace give I unto you, not as the world giveth. The moment we stop seeking for physical health, physical harmony, physical well-being, we then open the gates of consciousness to admit the spiritual light, which becomes the spiritual life of our being and of our body. That comes solely with the activity of realization of the Christ, and for no purpose. Remember this, that the nations of the world are seeking spiritual power in order to have harmonious human experiences. Don't forget, the nations of the world are seeking God right now so that they can have more earthly things, better earthly things, so that they can catch larger fish in their nets, bigger fish, better fish. But that the basis of our work is leave your nets. The basis of our work is leave this search for more and better human good and open consciousness to the spiritual realities. All right.